On today's episode of the Launchpad Podcast, we are talking about the NBA draft. So don't go anywhere. We have a great show for y'all today on the Launchpad Podcast.
Houston, Roger, we copy and we're standing by for your TV.
They throw it up. Oh, there goes Jalen Green. Humans can't fly. Rebound picked up by Green, who's back in. Plays it ahead of board. Back to Green. Oh, and in time for Thanksgiving. But there's plenty of yams to go around for everyone.
Welcome into another episode of the Launchpad Podcast presented by Clutch City Control Room. As always, I'm your host, Don Knock. I'm joined by my fellow host, Paulo Alves, over there. You can find me on Twitter at Don Knock. You can find him on Twitter at Paulo Alves NBA. You can find the pod at Clutch City Control at Clutch City CR. In the description there, we have the link for the link tree that has the YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify links. We want to continue to ask that y'all leave comments on the YouTube if you are watching there. We've got a lot of good comments. I'm sure we'll get a bunch of great, exciting comments on this video because everyone is very excited about how the Rockets drafted this year. So that's what our show is going to be about today as well. Obviously, the NBA draft. I'm sure many of y'all have watched, listened to, consumed various draft content, but we did our space during the draft that got really good returns on it. We want to thank everyone that tuned in for that. And now we're going to get into some of the post-draft analysis, starting with how the draft started. There are a lot of people that, including Paolo Banchero himself, that thought he was going to go with the first overall pick, even up to the last 5 minutes before the draft. That did not transpire. Obviously, he got picked by the Orlando Magic, leaving Jabari Smith to fall to 3 for the Houston Rockets. And let's start there. Paolo, we were big Paolo people. I think, over the last day and a half, we've made our pivot pretty strongly here, and we're going to be all the way on board with Jabari. We are not calling it the Jabari Jungle. That is old news. We are calling it the Jabari Jet now. How are you feeling about who we got with our third overall pick? How are you feeling about how he looks on the roster? And let's take it really from there.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Banchero was the guy that I wanted, right? And then for the first few minutes after, it became like obvious that we weren't gonna get him. I was kind of bummed out, but then again, this wasn't a like a one-player draft, right? I don't think Banchero was clear by far and away the best prospect, right? And so I don't think us getting Jabari is something that makes me like that sad after digesting it and thinking about it, because there were a lot of arguments for Jabari that made sense and that were true, and that I thought the Banchero arguments outweighed to a certain extent, but they still make sense now. And one of them is this is supposed to be a really weak draft, right? And you suppose that in a weak draft you're going to struggle to find, I don't know, your number ones or your number two offensive options or guys that can truly impact winning, because you're rating the prospects lower, right? And if you're assuming that that's the truth about this draft, then it makes sense to draft a guy like Jabari Smith, who maybe doesn't have the upside that Paolo Banchero does have, but he's got a way higher likelihood of being a contributor to a championship team, just because he's someone who can impact the game without the ball in a sense. He can just play defense and shoot threes, and that can be incredibly impactful to a winning team. And then as opposed to Paolo, who probably has the higher ceiling, but if he doesn't hit the higher ceiling, he's likely not going to be as good of a contributor to as many different types of teams as Jabari will be. And so from that perspective, Jabari puts us in a really interesting position where, well, now we don't really need to worry about the fit with Sengun. Now you can fit any type of superstar or any type of shot creation prospect, right? Any type of shot creation prospect, exactly, into this team, be it a point guard, be it a shooting guard, be it a wing, be it a center, be it whatever it is, because Jabari is someone who's going to be able to play multiple positions, and he doesn't restrict what you need to play around him in order for him to be successful. And so from that perspective, this leaves a lot of intriguing team building opportunities in the future, and it might be, at least for me, one of those I guess a blessing in disguise, at least for the people that had Paulo number one, because it might just be that next year, who that is considered to be a really stacked draft that's supposed to have the best prospects since LeBron James, and then even in the top 10 has a lot of these guys that project to be shot creators and guys that hit the ball in their hands, right? And the Rockets are projected to be one of the worst teams in the league next year as well. And so it might be a blessing in disguise that we were kind of not forced, but led into taking this guy who's more of a off-ball guy, more of a guy that can impact the game in other ways. Considering that next year there will likely be a lot of options, and most of them will be shot creators. Most of them will be offensive options. You got your guys like Derek Whitehead, your guys like the Thompson twins, um, your Scoot Hendersons, your Nick Smiths, all of these guys. Um, project to be exactly that. And so if you're going to likely be taking one of those guys next year, then it makes Jabari might be the best fit, right? And yeah, and then there's a lot to like with Jabari, right? It's while we like Banchero more, this doesn't mean that Jabari is some kind of bum or anything like that. There was a reason that most people thought he was going to go number one. Um, as we've talked about before, we've had this discussion a lot. He's a deadly shooter. He's a really lengthy defender. He's got an elite work ethic. He's an enforcer in every sense of the world of the word, and that's just something really valuable to surround your young guys with. I I I have a tweet with a lot of synergy stats, and I can read them to you, and you'll see. Wait, how did this guy fall to three? Um, so shooting stats, right? Per synergy, catch and shoot. In all catch and shoot shots, he averages basically 1.2 points per possession. That's 89th percentile in college. On contested shots, he averages 1.04, 81st percentile. Uncontested shots, I'll just say the percentile, so because that's the most important part because it's in comparison to other guys in college. And contested jump shots, 99th percentile. Dribble jumpers, 95th percentile. And then on spot ups, 95th percentile. Isolation, 91st percentile. Post ups, 91st percentile. Pick and roll man, 98th percentile. Coming off of screens, 92nd percentile. And then this is offensively, right? While we don't project him to be someone that creates his own shot, he is someone that is absolutely deadly off the ball. Like out to one of the best off ball prospects we've seen in a long time. And then when looking at his defensive stats, right? When defending spot ups, he's 93rd percentile, which means he's allowing people to score very little. When defending isolations, he's 99th percentile. When defending the pick and roll ball handler, he's 70th percentile. He's allowing half a point per possession when defending the pick and roll ball handler. Um, when defending, like in all of his defensive possessions where the opponent ends up shooting the ball, he's allowing 0.7 points per possession, and this is 96th percentile on all jump shots. He's 96th percentile on catch and shoot alone. He's 96th percentile once again. In dribble jumpers, when defending dribble jumpers, he's 98th percentile. At the rim itself, he is 92nd percentile. So we're getting one of the best versatile defenders, right? And probably the best one in this draft. We're getting someone who has a really high motor, someone who has a lot of stamina, so he will be able to play with defense, and he will be able to be moving off the ball offensively. And so this creates this player that's going to be a really nice tool for Salas to use in the system. And there's a lot to be excited about. So even though we didn't quite get the guy that at least I wanted, I think there's still a lot to be excited about. And as I said, there's been a lot of people on Twitter that have been on my ass about it, but I'm gonna support the guy that the Rockets draft no matter what. Do I still think Banchero is probably the best player we could have gotten? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that in that was my evaluation pre-draft. That doesn't mean next year I won't have a different opinion. That doesn't mean that at the end of, when it actually matters, when we're contending again, this wasn't the correct option. So, and then again, it wasn't even an option. That's the other thing that people forget. We had a third pick. We were going to take whichever one was left to us. So, yeah, I don't think there's any victory lapping worth doing, because ultimately we got the one that was left for us.
Yeah, and so when we were going through the draft process, like I was originally when I did my board, I had Paolo 1, Jabari 2, Chet 3. Through the draft process, we kind of went through different iterations of that, and that was still probably what my final board ended up being, something around there. I think you kind of went over the statistics and stuff and where he looks like he grades out on a lot of those things. I think watching the film, it really looks like he's going to be someone that can shoot well in like pull up in transition. It looks like he'll be able to shoot well, out of the mid post, be able to shoot well off the catch and shoot off the relocation. I'm not really worried about the shooting in any area of the game. Sometimes he'll get a little bit aggressive and take a kind of like a leaner three. Other than that, when he goes straight up into his jump shot, it just looks incredible. It looks fluid. The mechanics on it look great. So having someone that can shoot to that level is really going to open things up for Şengün, Jalen, KPJ, and then we'll see who's going to fill in the last spot there in the starting lineup. But I was someone I'm not gonna say I was skeptical about the handle, but I think if you drafted him number 1, you really want that guy to be able to create their own shot. And having taken him at 3, it's a little bit less of that type of pressure. We need this guy to really be the guy. We already have Jalen, we have Şengün. I think his playmaking is an area where he could stand and improve a little bit. And we saw some improvement from Jalen as a playmaker last year. So I'm going to give the coaching staff, the development staff, the benefit of the doubt. They're going to be able to work with him and help him make some of those simple reads like they got Jalen to do. If you could run some Şengün, Jabari pick and rolls with either of those guys as the ball handler, I think that would really open some stuff up as well. Then you can have Jalen and KPJ functioning off ball as well. I think those are the really two swing skill areas here between where he's going to hit and be like a very high level role player versus, elevate his game into being a superstar. He can take what he already has as a great, incredible foundation and add some ISO wiggle, add some ball handling, and then get some playmaking in there as well. That's when he goes from someone who's going to be, like we'll say like Michael Bridges with some better post moves, post scoring, to someone who's getting into. It's hard to even make the comparison here, but they throw out KD a lot, and I think that's a tough comparison for anyone. But maybe closer to like Chris Middleton range as an offensive player. As a defensive player, I will say, I think pairing him with Tari Eason is going to be an interesting move. I think Tari Eason will be someone who can take more of the primary defensive matchup. Tari Eason is someone who is very aggressive as a defender. He goes for a lot of steals. He likes to play in transition a lot. He gets a lot of dunks that way. I think that is a very interesting pairing with the way Stone did those two drafts back to back. I think Jabari, if you have to be the primary defensive matchup, and we've seen this even with someone like Kawhi, right? When Kawhi has to be the primary defensive matchup, he has to take a bit of a step back on offense. And so having someone like Tari Eason there who can be the primary defensive matchup on the other team's best player, and you have Jabari can, take that matchup sometimes if you need to switch or, take the secondary matchup. I think that will allow him to be more engaged offensively, doing things like trying to create his own shot and get to the rim. And that brings me to the next, I won't say concern, but the area that I'd like to see improvement from. Getting to the rim pressure, finishing at the rim. He's 6'10". He has a good wingspan. We've seen some of the tape that's already come out in terms of him having some good dunks on guys. But just being able to get to the rim, I think, is going to be important. Hopefully, the Rockets' spacing will be sufficient that It'll be easier for him to get there in the first place. He won't be having to try to dribble and maneuver through a crowd. He can really take his man one-on-one and then, have to use some simple counters and be able to get to the rim that way. If he can improve his finishing at the rim and improve his ability to get to the rim, I think that's going to open up a lot of things for him, because he's already good enough of a shooter that teams are really going to overplay him for his shot. And with that, right, the obvious counter there is to attack the closeout and attack the empty space that's going to be there because the defense is going to come so far out on him. Those, watching him immediately on tape and having watched him throughout this draft cycle, those are things that really stood out to me over time. I think the fit with Jalen is going to be really good, because I think Jalen's a very similar personality. I'll say Jalen's very similar work ethic wise. So, you have two guys coming in that are good locker room guys, good workers. Jalen obviously is, I would say Jabari is a better shooter than Jalen is right now, but obviously Jalen a little better at creating his own shot and things like that. But, you have two guys that are coming in. They can shoot, they can defend, they have good physical tools. You're not having to play undersized anymore. And that was another thing that I really hammered going back to last year was, since Trevor Ariza left, we've played undersized for the most part. We haven't been good rebounding for the most part. And Jabari's rebounding numbers weren't incredible at Auburn. It's 6.2 rebounds per game, which is, it's not an incredible number, but that's a good enough number that I'm not concerned about his rebounding in general. I'll have to go back and watch a little bit more on how he is as a positional rebounder and boxing out and things like that. But just from a physical standpoint, we no longer playing undersized. We should be able to get some good rebounds. We'll see how long Eric Gordon stays in the starting lineup. But, if we get Eason in there as well, finally we have plus size player at the 3 and the 4. And, Şengün is a little bit undersized as a center, but when your other 4 players are all, they'll have big physical advantages at their position, I think it really sets you up to be successful with the way they can deploy a lot of these lineups. I think the good thing about having Tari Eason and Jabari Smith both on this roster is that you can do a variety of different things defensively. You're going to be able to switch. You're going to be able to hedge and recover if you want to go that way. You can be able to run drop with Şengün. You can, start to mix up defensive coverages. I will say, I just want to say this. Well, I'll save it for when we get to the Tari section, but I think the other important thing here is that Jabari, Jalen, KPJ, right? Like, these are all guys who should have no problem slotting into multiple defensive schemes. And so that way, the only person you're having to quote unquote hide defensively to any degree is really Şengün. So that was a big selling point for a lot of people coming in, was if you get Jabari, then that really is going to allow Şengün to not have to play as pivotal of a role defensively. You can have, you can have the point of attack defense kind of make up for a little bit of, maybe not as effective rim protection. So I know a lot of the Şengün people are very pleased with this pick. Again, I'm very pleased with this pick. I think there's really not a lot of downsides, and I think the upsides are definitely there. If some of these swing skills hit, you could see Jabari really take himself into like upper echelons of players in this league. When you look at the structure of the league generally, right? This is a big wing league. The guys that have been the best players in the league outside of, Steph Curry for the last decade have all been big wings. Jabari slots right into that same mold. And I think, this is going to be a good test of Steven Silas's abilities to develop, superstar prospects.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to mention is Jabari himself, right? I think Jalen is someone who leads by example, but is not extremely vocal. At least it didn't seem like it the first year. That could have been because Wood was the quote-unquote leader or whatever it is. It didn't feel like he needed to. But I think Jabari, very much on the defensive end, is someone who's going to demand more out of you. I made a tweet joking about it earlier yesterday, I think, saying how long would Christian Wood and Jabari Smith last in the same locker room before a fight broke out because Christian was not trying whatsoever on defense. And while that was a joke, with every good joke, there's a little hint of truth behind it. And I do think that Jabari is someone who is a bona fide winner and that will demand maximum effort, at least on defense, from his teammates. And then I think we have the offensive talent that we don't really need people to tell us to play better offense because, well, most of our guys are great offensive players, but I do think an enforcer on the defensive end is something that will help this team. And a culture setter like Jabari, or like what I think Jabari can be, is definitely a good, like a refreshing presence for this team. And then the other thing I wanted to point out as well about Jabari is the entire thing about him, the finishing at the rim. I was reading about it, and apparently he was really good at finishing around the rim when he played without Walker Kessler on the floor. So all the way up to I think 59% on twos and 70 something percent at the rim, something crazy like that. So it could very well be that it's just a college system with terrible guards and with a center that camps in the paint, and that creates terrible spacing, and then maybe that's why he was struggling. And then his percentages don't look awful at the rim. Like, that's not the case. The case is it's a really low percentage of the time that he gets to the rim, right? He usually settles for jump shots. And whether that's because, well, his jump shots is deadly or because there's no space, I think that's something that's coachable, and I think we'll have more intel as to if he's actually a bad finisher at the rim at the NBA level when we watch him play, because as I said, it's mostly a volume issue, not a ability issue to some extent, right? And even if it is, and even if it turns out to be an ability issue, he's 18. I think that's one of the things that you can improve, and that you can teach him how to improve. And a hard worker like him, I'm sure he'll get the hang of it.
All right, so that's going to lead us into our first break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Tari Eason, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. And continuing our second segment here on the Launchpad podcast, we'll be talking about Tari Eason. So Tari Eason, forward out of LSU. I'm sure by now a lot of y'all have watched his introductory press conference clips, maybe some of the clips floating around Twitter, and some of his highlights as well. I think something I just want to kind of clear the air about. Me and Paolo talked to different people throughout the draft process, and initially there were a lot of Rockets fans that were very high on Tari Eason, right? I was one of them. I've been requesting that the Rockets sign a big wing or draft a big wing for 2 years now. So the first 2 picks in this draft were just, they absolutely warmed my heart because I have been asking for this player archetype the entire time. But while we were talking to people throughout the draft process, we had heard that Tari Eason wasn't doing well in some workouts, that his processing may be an issue, and he was having trouble doing some drills and things like that. And I went back after we made the pick. I listened to him speak on friend of the show Roosh, his podcast with Zach Noble. Listen to that interview. I listened to the clips he had on the Rockets Twitter account where they were just responding to fans. I was like, this guy doesn't sound like, someone that was struggle with these drills. Doesn't sound like someone that, has some sort of processing issue. He sounded very intelligent. He sounded like someone that's very smart, very good basketball feel and things like that. And so, sometimes stuff comes out for various reasons. Maybe he had one bad workout with the team or whatever the case may be. But, my initial from the tape, from hearing him speak and things like that, I think this could be someone that winds up grading out way above where we drafted him at. You watch the tape, he's someone who's very aggressive defensively. He has very good hands. He has very large hands. He's able to just reach in as guys are driving and stop the drive entirely. Very Kawhi Leonard-esque, honestly. And that was someone that he cited as a big influence on his game when he was speaking with Roosh. But the big thing for him is going to be, let's say 2 sections here. One, some people are a little bit skeptical of the shot. He brings the ball up kind of low, and he brings it up. His elbow is very compact when he brings it up. And some people don't like the way the form looks. At the end of the day, I am someone who's a little bit more of a stickler on form. I think I think, you can make some minor tweaks to his form that would bring the release point up a little bit higher. I don't think that's anything that has to be completely rebuilt. His shot is quick. His shot is compact. And it does go in. So that's part of the battle there is, making sure the ball goes through the hoop. But I think overall, he's not someone who I watch him shoot, and I think he needs a complete form rebuild the way we saw Lonzo Ball coming into the league, or like a Michael Kidd-Gilchrist or something along those lines. His shot, it's not the most beautiful aesthetic shot the way Jabari Smith is, but I don't think it's a situation where you're going to have to completely scrap the form and start from nothing. I think there are enough pieces there that you can make minor tweaks, and things will go very well for him. The second thing is he is very right-hand dominant as a driver. He does need to, expand his game with his left hand. He's someone who is very explosive and very athletic and very, very. There's people that are fast and then there's people that are quick, right? And he's someone that is quick. So you'll see him close down space very fast. You'll see him cover ground very fast, in short areas. And so because he has that ability, he's able to really sneak things through as a finisher. He's able to use his explosiveness, his strength, and his physicality to finish at the rim very well. And he really hasn't had to just solely rely on craft and his handle to get to the rim. He's probably not ever going to be the first offensive option. So he is able to work in more as a cutter, as a slasher, as someone who teams aren't really going to load up against him to force him to his weak hand, right? He's going to be able to use his basketball feel, his read of the defense, and kind of work in that way. But, expanding his game to be able to use his left hand as a finisher, as a driver, that's a very obvious improvement point for him. Defensively, I think he's someone that can switch 1 through 5. He's mentioned that he has a good wingspan. He has, good strength. He has good quickness, like I was alluding to earlier. And, just overall, I think if he can hit threes at 36% in the NBA, I mean, I think the passing, we'll see. Obviously, that's, not something that's going to be critical, but if he can get some passing chops as well, that's going to help things a lot, going and being an NBA starter. But, the other elements of his game, basically everything you want, like the prototypical modern wing, right? Hits the three, can finish at the rim, can defend different positions. So just overall, I am extremely pleased with this pick. I wanted Sohan. I think Sohan is going to be a good player as well. But, I think we're going to have been in a trade up situation to get Jeremy Sohan. That didn't transpire for, a variety of reasons. I'm sure GM Rafael Stone tried to explore those options. But, staying at 17, this was the guy who I was completely comfortable with this pick. I still am comfortable with this pick as I've dived into his tape even more. I'm getting even more excited about it. So, just overall, I would say this is a slam dunk of a pick by Rafael Stone.
Yeah, there's a reason everybody that. Like, if there was one consensus guy amongst Rockets fans, at least on Twitter, was that everybody wanted Tari Eason. There's a reason for it. It's a 6'8" guy with a 7'2" wingspan with massive hands that can, shoot to some extent, right? People don't love the form. If it goes in, it goes in. Don't really care. If any of it comes into the NBA and it doesn't work, we've taught Caitlin Martin how to shoot, and he hadn't shot a one. Like, he wasn't a shooter at any point in his career. And then 6'8", 7'2" wingspan, really good defender. Like, I usually say there's 2 types of defenders, or there's 3 types of defenders. There's the guys that can't defend whatsoever. And then there's the guys that have the tools and they do a decent enough job. And then there's the guys that will truly get into your space and truly try to play lockdown defense and stop you from scoring and forcing a turnover, right? This is not one of those guys that's going to make the right play or like funnel you into a shot blocker or just stay in front but still give you space to get your jump shot off or stuff like that. No, this is a guy that's going to be in your face trying to shut you down. And so that's something that this team needs, right? And then the archetype itself, I really like Tari Eason first off because he has the motor, right? And then it plays a very valuable role in the NBA. I've said this might be a hot take, but I think he's more of a 4, and Jabari would be more of a 3 if they played both together. Mostly because I think Jabari will be more comfortable defending quicker players than Tari will. Although they both can do it to some extent, and the the way I look at him, he would be an improved version of PJ Tucker. He would be bigger wingspan, same motor. Um, as in he would be a 4 that you can sit him in the corner and he can shoot threes, he can set screens well, and then he can defend up to the 3s, some 2s, and he can play small ball 5 if you want to go small. I think he's the prototypical ideal small ball 5 in terms of his body type and his strength. And then on the defensive end, you want him to shoot, right? But that's not the only thing that he can do. He's a very physical guy. He's really good at driving with his right hand. I think the next step would be maybe some finishes with his left hand and then being able to make the extra pass when the defense comes. I think that would be important as well. But I project this guy to be one of the most valuable role players in the league, and that's why I love them so much. I always believe that at 17 you should be going for a guy you think can be an elite role player. Don't swing for the fences. You're risking wasting a pick. I think Tari. There's very few scenarios where he's a wasted pick, and I think he's a role player in 90+% of scenarios. And so it's just a really exciting guy to bring on. I think if him and Jabari can manage to be our 2 wings, or power forward and your small forward, then that's a really good defensive foundation. Then those are 2 enforcers that are going to demand the rest of your team to play well. Because when you are, I mean, anybody that has ever played sports, when you're in a team where everybody else is working really, really hard, you feel the obligation to play hard as well. If you're on a team where people are just slacking off and they're not getting full effort, then you're not going to give full effort either. And it's not doesn't make you any less of a player. It's just human nature. It's just how most people are wired. These 2 guys are not that way. These 2 guys are going to come in and set their own culture, and they're going to demand more out of their teammates. That's what I believe. And Jalen Green, we know, is someone. I mean, this guy was on a 20-game losing streak, fighting through screens, down 20 in the fourth quarter, and that's also a special type of attitude towards the game. And those 3 guys, I think, are going to be able to set the culture for this team. Then Shengun himself, like he's not the best defender, but it's not because he doesn't want to play defense. It's mostly because of size, quickness, some stuff that can be worked on as we go along. But I think and then KPJ is the one that's more iffy, or it depends on the day. He might be locked in, he might not. And I think surrounding KPJ with all of these types of players will be really good for his trajectory as well. Yeah, I think Tari Eason was a home run pick. I mean, I give this an A++. I remember in the draft party pick 13 came along, and I was like, if I was Charlotte, I would pick AJ Griffin, and then dare Cleveland to take one of the bigs and take the other one at 15. And what they did is they took the Ren, they traded him away, and then Cleveland took Akbati, which was kind of mind blowing with AJ Griffin on the board. But I had already called this pick as well because Akbati straight up told people that he wanted to go to Cleveland, and he fits his needs. That Cleveland has a wing that can shoot, so they went to Akbati, and then at 15, we were like, well, Charlotte still hasn't taken a big, and there's a clear gap in the roster that they need a defensive big. Mark Williams was there, AJ Griffin was there, and Tari Eason was there. I was like, these are 3 prospects that I really love. But I loved Mark Williams if we had gotten Banchero because I think they would be a really good fit together. If you're getting Jabari, I don't really think you need a Mark Williams type behind them. And you can live with Shengun there and he'll be fine. So I was like, please, Charlotte, please don't go off script. Please take what you need. Please take Mark Williams. And they took Mark Williams. And at that point, everybody in the space was like, we are guaranteed to get one of Tari Eason or AJ Griffin. That was a massive win. Atlanta ended up taking AJ Griffin. That's fine. I would probably rather have him, but still, it doesn't matter. I was really happy with Tari Eason. I think that's an A+++++ pick milestone.
And one other thing I just want to reiterate here is that Tari Eason is someone who's a good rebounder. Again, like I said in the first segment, I've wanted to improve the rebounding for quite some time now. That's been one of my things I've kind of pushed for on Twitter. But Tari is someone who's very physical, very aggressive as a rebounder. So I do like that. Jalen obviously has a lot of athleticism. Should be able to be a plus rebounder. KPJ size advantage at his position, and then Şengün is very good as a positional rebounder as well. So I'm hoping that this year the Rockets can improve as a rebounding team and improve as a defensive team, because that's really what Tari and Jabari should bring to the team, right? Is defense, rebounding, size advantage, and then we'll see about the shooting for Tari, but Jabari is definitely going to bring shooting to the team as well. Neither one of these guys are big assist guys. I think Jabari was like at 2 assists per game and Tari was at 1. So that does make it even more critical that Şengün is allowed to operate as a passer. KPJ makes another leap as a playmaker, and Jalen as well takes a leap in his playmaking. So that's the one area that going from Banchero to Jabari, you're going to take a little bit of a hit, is in the passing and playmaking department. So you're going to have to get those other 3 guys to make a leap there. You hope that they can. And then you also hope that the defense that you gain from getting these 2 guys is going to allow you to have more possessions in transition, more possessions on offense, and hopefully Jabari is a very low turnover guy. I think Tari is a little bit more of a turnover prone player than Jabari is.
And I saw people were making that argument in the spaces. People, when we talked about Tari Eason, brought that up plenty. And I'm like, yeah, he was a high turnover guy in college when he was like the clear best player on his team, right? You're bringing him to the NBA, and you're not. I think there's a little bit of a dissonance between what Rockets fans kind of expect out of Tari Eason and what the rest of the draft community expects or thinks we expect. We are really high on him because for the longest time we had this guy called PJ Tucker that we loved a lot, and he played a similar kind of role as a high intensity defender that could shoot threes. Wasn't an elite shooter, but he could shoot. And then
PJ Tucker was by the numbers the best corner 3-point shooter in the league. So I just want to put some respect on him before you take it too far.
Outside of that, he wasn't like known as the sharp shooter, right, at any point in his career. So that I think.
I think you're being very generous with that characterization, but I'm gonna let you continue.
I think most people just expect him to be that, and if you're going to be this elite role player, this PJ Tucker type, I don't really care about your turnover proneness, whatever you want to call it, because you're not going to be getting put into positions where you're trying to run offense or you're trying to score an ISO or the offense is highly dependent on you, right? That's not what we expect out of him, and I don't think that's what Salas is going to have him do. We have Jalen Green, KPJ, and Alperen Şengün. Those are going to be the 3 guys running the offense most of the time. So I don't buy that. And the other thing I was going to say is
I will say real quick, I think there is, if Jalen or Jabari does get in a situation where they become doubled, right, you do at least need Tari to be able to function, as someone who can handle some sort of creation off of like a ball rotation out of that. And so again, that's not like a big part of the offense, but that's where the turnovers could come into play, right? If he's having to create out of the short roll or something like that, or out of the ball rotation off of a double for Jalen or something.
But the thing is, at LSU, right, this was the best player on the team, and the situations he was put in that lead to turnovers are very different than the situations that you're describing as someone who's just trying to capitalize on the advantages that you get out of a Jalen Green double team. And then the other thing I was going to say is, to me, the biggest thing about the 2 picks we've talked so far, I think we'll get into Tyty in the next segment, is there's a clear culture shift, and Tyty will tie into this as well. But there's a clear, we just got at this point 2 really, really good defenders, and as I said, 2 guys with insane motor rather than just being good defenders. Because I think Mikal Bridges is the example I bring out, and I love Mikal Bridges. He's a really, really good defender, and he can lock somebody up, but he's not that type of enforcer, get in your face about it, be the ultimate effort guy, your PJ Tucker types, your Marcus Smart types. And I think both Eason and Jabari have that in their way of playing the game, where they're going to give everything they've got. And I think those are really important players to have on a team that, up until this point, was really, really high talent, offensive talent, really high. Like, these guys are just gifted players at basketball, and they usually get along fine just because of that exactly. And not saying that Tari and Jabari are not gifted players whatsoever, but they aren't overly reliant on that talent the way Kevin Porter Jr. is, or the way Jalen Green is, even though Jalen is kind of an exception. It's not that type of. These are guys that very much rely on that motor and that extra edge to be where they are today. Because Tari Eason wasn't a really high touted prospect his entire career. He was in college last year, and he wasn't even talked about to be even a second round pick. And this year, he went to LSU, and because of exactly what we're talking about, just because of exactly what we're talking about, he went and he is a first round pick. He was almost a lottery pick. And Jabari Smith the same way. He was not amongst your Paulo Bancheros or your Chet Holmgrens at the beginning of this. He is someone who very much came from a lower tier and earned himself or fought his way into consideration for the number 1 overall pick. And having those types of guys in a rebuild is really important. And because culture, as much as it's a, what's it called? It's something that people talk about a lot and usually they overvalue. It is still valuable. And I think the difference between a team like the Timberwolves, who had a bunch of talent, right? They had Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns and at some point Zach LaVine as well, right? These were clearly teams that had all the talent but missed these types of defensive players and these types of leaders, right? And I think it's easy on a rebuild to get a little bit lost into all of this offensive talent and then care too little about defense. And I think these guys kind of have that covered, and I truly believe that. And the other thing is, once again, tying it back to next year's draft, that this then allows us to next year's draft once again swing for the fences or try and get another offensive talent, because I think something that I think it's a priority for Salas, it's a priority for Stone, and these picks match the value that they're trying to put on defense this year and creating an identity there.
So what you're saying is that Rafael Stone beat the doesn't care about defense allegations?
Oh, okay. Nobody's gonna get that reference, but
that was for all the people that said we're turning into ball don't stop. That was what that was for. So that brings us to a great spot to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the Rockets' third selection of this draft, and that is Tyty Washington. So don't go anywhere. We will be right back. And continuing into our third segment here on the Launchpad podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about the Rockets' third selection in this draft, and that is Tyty Washington. So before we get into what he looks like on the court and what he's going to look like in the Rockets rotation, let's talk a little bit about what happened to get the Rockets to the point where they made the selection, and that is they took the 26th pick that they got in the Christian Wood trade, and they traded that for the 29th pick in this draft. So Paolo, talk about a little bit about the trade, and did you like the value that they got back in return for pick 26?
I mean, I think it's a no-brainer, especially when you look at the entirety of the trade, because they turned the Christian Wood trade where they got pick 26 into this other trade, and so the final tally, or I guess I'll start with the pick 26 in specific. But so at pick 26, we were sitting there in draft spaces and we were thinking, well, great, we're guaranteed one of EJ Liddell, Tyty Washington, or Jalen Hardy. Any of these guys are clear first round talents. You could argue that Tyty was borderline, not a lottery talent, but borderline someone who you would be okay taking at pick 17. And we know
that's what Sam Vecini said in real time. He said at pick 17, he said, you got two guys here. The best two players available are Tari Eason and Tyty Washington. And Tyty Washington continued to slide for quite some time after he said that.
Yeah, and so they traded back from 26 to 29, and then you're trading back 2 spots, right? So you're guaranteeing still that you are still going to get one of those three guys at 29 if you value them closely. So you did that, and you accumulated 2 second-round picks from a team that those might be good second-round picks. The Timberwolves are not known as perennial winners. They have a very flimsy situation, although they're young. It doesn't seem like something that's very stable over there. And so, although they're second-round picks, and those have whatever, like not a lot of value, but those could be good second-round picks. They're in 2025 and 2027, if I'm not mistaken. That's a lot of time for the Timberwolves to go back to stinking again. Um, and so it makes all sense in the world. You trade it back, and then you reach 29, and none of the three prospects that we were talking about had gone. And so you still had your choice at those three. And they still got the guy that they wanted at 26 at 29. So 2 free second-round picks. And then when you look at it from the entirety of the trade, they now basically traded Christian Wood for Boban Marjanovic, Tyty Washington, and 2 second-round picks from a team that's historically bad. And so when you compare that to what the Timberwolves, what the Pistons got, they got a Milwaukee 2025 pick that's top 4 projected, and they got, I think, 2 seconds in the second that's a swap, right? And so it's basically this. It's close to the same return for players that were at least in our universe of NBA Twitter were valued completely different. Everybody would have said, "Oh, grant someone who they could maybe either in a package or whatever, maybe they could get pick 7 with him," right? And with Christian Wood it was, well, I'm not sure if Christian Wood's worth a first-round pick by Danny Leroux just a couple weeks ago, right? And so we ended up getting basically the same value, whether that was a bad deal by Detroit or just a really good deal by us. That's what ended up happening. And so from the deals perspective, that was perfect. I'm not sure how much playing time we're going to be able to give Tyty Washington this year, depending on how they value him in Knicks. But that might eventually make the case that we should have tried and traded the pick for a future pick, but we don't even know if that was on the table at that point. But in a vacuum, for right now, I think it was a really good trade.
Yeah, I definitely agree that's a really good trade. Again, like we've heard, there was someone else that also mentioned that they had Tyty around 15 to 19 grade, and well, I'm gonna sneeze real quick. sorry about that. But yeah, so that was the value that most people had him at, was mid first round, and we ended up basically getting him right before the second round hit. The other thing I want to talk about is there were a lot of people that watched Tyty Washington closer at Kentucky than I did, that mentioned that once he had his ankle injury, he just looked like a completely different player. I think that's something that also needs to be pointed out. That could be one of the reasons why he ended up falling to this range. That is a good way to get value. Something I'll compare it to, when Michael Porter Jr. was coming out, there was a lot of concerns about his back, right? And that's what led him to fall from a top 3 guy to pick 14 where the Nuggets took him. So, players that get injured in college and that kind of affects how their season goes, that can have very different career trajectories for them, right? And so I think it's important, before we start to get into Tyty Washington's game here, the Rockets had said a number of times that they were really high on Daishen Nix. They said they had a lottery grade on him. They didn't take Tyty Washington in the lottery. I do want to point that out, because a lot of people are going to say, well, you signed Nix as a UDFA, and then you took Tyty as a first-round pick, so Tyty is guaranteed to get the playing time over Nix. The Rockets said they had a first-round or a lottery grade on Nix. We'll have to see what they say they had the grade for Tyty as, but Tyty was an obvious best player available situation. Nix was best player available in undrafted free agency. So I think with these guys, I think there will be a little bit more competition for that spot than some people may be leading on, because the team does seem like they're fairly high on Nix. But with that said, let's get into a little bit of how he plays on the court, right?
Yeah. So let me just point out some stats before we get into that, so people know how much the injury actually affected him. So Tyty got injured in a game against Tennessee. This was the 17th game of the season, so it was basically halfway or a little bit over halfway. Kentucky was, I think, let me just double check. I want to call it basketball reference stat thing. So this lags a little bit. Okay. So at this point of the season, they had played 17 games. They had lost only 3. And Tyty, who we'll get into it, but his archetype is a true point, right? Someone who's very much a distributor first and then a scorer second. He was averaging 14.5 points per game, 4.2 rebounds per game, and 4.8 assists per game with 1.2 steals and only 1.8 turnovers. So his assist to turnover ratio was really, really good, especially for a guy that's a lead guard. You'll find guys with better assist to turnover ratios, but they're usually secondary or tertiary playmakers. Tyty was a lead, a lead playmaker. And then you look at his percentages, and this is the really enticing part. He shot 51.5% from the field, 41% from 3 on 3 attempts a game, and 81% from the line, right? And so this is when he got injured. And then he got hurt, and his jump shot seemed to have not as much lift on it. He wasn't jumping a lot. He was basically just kind of, it wasn't the set shot, but he was like a good 3 centimeters from the ground, which I think is like an inch or 2 inches or whatever. And so from that perspective, this is the Tyty Washington that people fell in love with. And then he had that injury, and from that game against Tennessee until the end of the season, he averaged 10, 2, and 3 on 36 28, 70 splits, right? And so you can tell that the injury bothered him a lot, and he tanked his percentages a lot, right? And then he still ended up for the season shooting 35% or something close to that, but there was clearly something wrong, and I think that scared off a lot of people. And so I think with a clean bill of health, I think he can be a really special player, and he can be that rare archetype of your true point guard that can shoot threes and play elite defense, because this is a 6'3.5" guy, but he's got a massive wingspan. I think it's 6'10" or something like that, right? And he is
6'8", I think it says. Or it says.
Yeah, as it's
pretty
6'8".
Good. Yeah, I have 6'8" right here, which that's still really good. That's still +6.
Okay.
So
yeah, and this is not just someone who has the tools to be a great defender. This is someone that takes defense personally. He's going to fight through screens. He's going to recover when he gets beat. He's someone who is going to be a really good defender, plus the playmaking, plus the being a really good shooter, right? And so he is once again one of those players that you can fit with any superstar in the league, because they can affect the game off the ball and they can get the team into sets, and they're really smart players. He's really good at executing passes. When you watch him play, you can clearly tell that's a point guard, right? That's not a scoring guard trying to be a point guard. That's a true point. And while that archetype might be overrated to some extent, it's still a very rare archetype and a really valuable one. I think the Celtics that just lost in the finals would tell you that if they could have had a true point, they would have very much liked to have one. And so I won't steal all of the points away, but I'll let you go into it. But I really like the Washington pick, especially at pick 29, I think. Yeah. That's a steal. I really like his attitude towards the game. I also think that he can be a culture setter. And never bet against Kentucky guards, right? That's the motto. You can never bet against Kentucky guards. So yeah.
So watching a little bit of Tyty Washington tape and stuff like that, what you'll see stand out early is that he looks like a good shooter. Paolo gave the numbers on that. He doesn't even before the ankle injury, he's not someone that jumps really high on his shot. He tries to get it off with his quick release. The release it's not low like Eason's is, but it's not a super high release because he gets it off so quick. It's a little bit, I hate using this comparison, but it's a little bit Curry-esque, right? In the way he just kind of, it's lower release, but very, very fast. He does seem to struggle once he gets by his man. Sometimes like he doesn't have super elite burst. So sometimes his man can get back into the play and get a contest on him. So he's gonna have to work on either putting that defender in jail or using his strength to create a little bit more separation there. He has a good floater that he'll go to. Has a good runner as well, and it seems like he started to go to those a lot, and defenses started to sit on them. So he may have to, find a way to be able to get all the way to the rim at times, so teams don't just sit on that floater. He's not a Jalen Green level like nuclear athlete, so his finishing at the rim sometimes is a little bit more like craft based, skill based, finesse based than just relying on explosion. And that something that did come into play there was going to the floater, going to the runner, and those type of shots, and not getting all the way to the rim. His pull-up mid-range game is very good, and I say that's probably like the strongest aspect of his game offensively. So he can come around to screen, work into space, and then pull up really fast the mid-range. He's not super fast, but his change of speed from fast to slow, coming into a pull up mid range and stopping like really quick and then pulling up into the shot, is very good. And then his release on the pull up is very fast as well. So players really aren't going to be able to get back into the play when he is taking that shot most of the time. His passing looks very good. It's a lot of on time, on target passing. He had I think it was the Kentucky record, 17 assists in a game, which obviously very impressive. Paolo mentioned the assisted turnover numbers as well, but he seems like he's a good passer. He has a lot of zip on the passes. He has a lot of pop on the passes, and they do hit the shooters right where they need them to be in the shot pocket. He looks very comfortable throwing the pocket pass. We'll see if there's a player on this team that's capable of, dunking off of that short roll or dunking off of the pocket pass, but he does look very comfortable throwing that pass in general. I think the last thing I noticed watching him was that he can be indecisive on screens at times. If there's the obvious situation where he can get into space and get into his pull up, he can. If there's the obvious situation where he can get to the roll man, I think he will. He'll look for dump offs and stuff like that. But sometimes he just doesn't know what he wants to do with the screen. He isn't great at calling for a rescreen and things like that. I think that can be learned a little bit more as he goes on. We'll see how much pick and roll they allow him to play. We'll see who his pick and roll partners as well. So I think that'll be a big factor here. But he doesn't get tons of separation when he's trying to isolate, and I think some of that is not being just the most nuclear athlete. Some of that may be the ankle injury coming into play again, but he does need to do a better job of using his strength and physicality to get that separation. And he does that some. Don't get me wrong. He does use that a little bit to be able to get separation, but he doesn't get just tons and tons of separation the way you see Jalen, right? Like Jalen just has all types of space after he puts together some of his dribble moves against defenders when he's trying to break them down. So overall, I think, can I see him taking over for, starting point guard at some point? I think maybe backup point guard, like in a really elite backup point guard, maybe like a Monte Morris, right? I think that's the type of role I see him really realistically slotting into. But that's still a really good player, right? And that's someone that you can really trust to run the offense. Like we mentioned, low turnovers, things like that. I think his decision making is generally pretty good. So overall, at 29, thrilled with the pick. As a player, I'm very excited. I think he has a lot of good, interesting tools. I do like the mid-range pull-up game. I do like the passing and stuff like that. So, overall, again, rate this pick very highly. Getting 2 second-round picks on top of that for training back just really put it over the top for me. Do you have any closing thoughts on Tyty Washington? I'm sure we'll have a little bit more breakdown after the weekend. We can really dive into the tape on these guys.
His introductory press conference and his little videos for the Rockets main page were really entertaining. So, along with a good basketball player, I value a fun personality. And I'm joking. Obviously, I'm not drafting guys for fun personalities, but I just wanted to point that out. He was really fun. So he definitely fits the Vibes Club.
I want to see Tyty Washington and Josh Christopher interact. I think that would be really fun together.
Man, imagine the guard defense on that secondary unit if Tyty is the point and Josh is the shooting guard. like that, that's a lockdown, or the potential to be a lockdown second unit. And the good thing with that is when both of your backups are lockdown defenders, you could switch one of those guys into the starting lineup for certain matchups as well, right? And you're not putting the defense on either side.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And it'll be interesting to see. I'm sure we're gonna have months and months to do rotation talk, but it'll be interesting to see, what shakes out with the rotation in terms of who those guys are going to play with. Because right now, the rumor is that Eric Gordon is going to be the starting small forward. We'll see if Eric Gordon's long for the roster or how long that lasts. But if it is Ty, Josh Christopher, and Tari, right? I think there's some really interesting things you can do defensively with those three. So we'll see if they are able to get a backup center as well. I could see this being a very, very strong defensive unit, a reserve unit, and that will allow those guys to be good transition players. I think that's where Tari Eason especially really excels, is in transition. So I think there's a lot that you can be doing there, because obviously most other teams' backup groups, if you have someone as aggressive as Tari Eason as a defender, he's going to really take advantage of backup ball handlers and players that aren't able to really protect the ball. And so I think that will allow a lot of good things to happen. Josh Christopher, also a really good guy in transition. One of the better guys in transition, I would say, on the team, along with Jalen, right? Jalen's going to be good in transition. He's good pretty much everywhere on offense. But it'll be interesting. Like I said, if you put Tate in the backup unit as well, how do you like the fit between Tate and Ty? Because obviously Tate's someone that wants to have the ball in his hands a little bit more.
I really think, I saw the Daishen Tate comments about him working with Draymond, and I think that's great that you're working with Draymond, but I think shooting is a more important thing. And he was mentioning like working with Draymond as in, my shooting is not that important. I think it's the opposite. I think shooting is really, really important, because the only reason Draymond gets away with not being able to shoot is because he is once in a generational type of defender, once in a generational type of the offensive role that he has only works because he has a once in a generation type of shooter to play with, or two of them actually.
And then three at times when he had KD with him there as well.
Yeah, so it's like that's not reliable.
We have 6'10" Clay now. We have 6'10" Clay now, so maybe it'll work out.
It's just that Tyty Washington has a release close to Steph Curry. So listen,
Rockets are now a shooting team. You heard it here first.
Nah, I'm joking. I think, in particular with Tate, I'd rather him focus on getting a jump shot and be a typical 3-and-D wing, and let the guards do the guards things, and have your passing be an extra and be an extra threat rather than be the main cell of your game. I think would be the ideal scenario. I think it's a lot easier to be a 3-and-D wing with some connector skills rather than be a connector with some 3-and-D wing skills. I would much rather the first one than the second one. And with, I think that second unit now with Tyty, and I'm not sure if it's going to be Tyty or Nix, but I think there's now I don't think there's going to be playmaking issues, and I think they should just run the system through the guards. But the other thing I want to touch on before we close is there's a big roster crunch when it comes to these forward/wings, and if they're planning on bringing on a center, that means that Garuba's not going to be able to play center. And so what's Garuba going to play? Because you've got Jabari, even if you move Jabari to the 3, right? Now you've got 3 spots, backup 3, backup 4, and starting 4, right? And you have KJ, Garuba, Tate, Eric Gordon if he's going to play the 3, right? You've got a big roster crunch there, and I'm not sure who you're planning to send to the G League. But I would rather just have guys play with the main team, and because imagine if Eason outperforms Garuba, right? And I think he will. Then are you really gonna send Garuba again to the G League? Like, how much more? I mean, I think he would still have some stuff to learn in the G League, but still, I think at that point you're just devaluing assets for no reason. And so I think a little consolidation trade, or at least trading a couple of the vets, or KJ Martin if he's really unhappy with being here, is something that's going to need to be coming. Otherwise, it's not really about pleasing KJ Martin. It's about an asset that's going to be devaluing in the G League or at the end of the bench that you'd rather get something for rather than run them into the ground and then becoming one of those young players that just didn't pan out.
All right. So in real time, just tweeted out a poll for you guys that we just talked about, kind of something along these lines, right? Who do you want to start at the 3 this season? Not who do you think will start. I think most people think that Eric Gordon will probably start as long as he's still on the roster, but who do you want to start at 3 this season? So I just tweeted that out from the Clutch City Control Room account at Clutch City CR. So go vote in that poll. I'm going to actually link the poll in the description of the YouTube account or the YouTube video and the podcast video. So if y'all want to jump on there and vote in that poll, please do. I think that'll be interesting conversation and starting point there. We'll just close out with one more thing before we go. On that note, right? We heard last week that Phoenix, Philadelphia, and potentially even the New York Knicks were interested in Eric Gordon. Obviously, a trade did not materialize during the draft, but a trade could definitely happen coming into free agency as well. I do also want to point out, with Kyrie Irving on the move, that would give, Kyrie Irving potentially on the move, that would give the Rockets an opportunity to maybe jump into that trade as a third party facilitator. So that's something to keep an eye on. Not getting a first round pick this year for Eric Gordon, I don't think that was something that the team really was too depressed about, too sad about. I think drafting four guys again would have been a little bit too much. But Paolo, how do you feel about Eric Gordon? How do you feel about his time on the roster? Do you think that he's going to be here to start the season, or do you think that the Rockets are going to find a trade partner for him in the next couple of days before free agency starts?
Neither. I think he's going to be traded after free agency. I think some teams will strike out on some of their free agents and might return to the Rockets for Eric Gordon. I think the Suns and their situation with DeAndre Ayton, they are someone who is interested, we know, but I do think it would be heavily reliant on what happens with Ayton and how much do they have to pay him to keep him off, if they're not keeping him whatsoever, or whatever happens with that team. And so I think that's a big domino that still needs to fall. But I would rather than trade him. I love Eric Gordon. I really value what he did for us here. I think he's low-key someone who might not quite have reached jersey retirement type of role, but he's someone up there that I not as a meme consider a Rockets legend. He was here for a long time. He was here for when we were good. He contributed to when we were good. When we were bad, he didn't cry about it. Didn't make a big fuss about it. He was a pro. We saw what he could do as a mentor last year. He wasn't taking, he was clearly at times the best player on the floor, and he wasn't taking a big role like Christian Wood was, and stuff like that. So I really value what he did for us and how much of a pro he has been. But I would rather have him leave. First of all, because I genuinely mean this, I would love for him to get a championship. I would love to see him succeed on another team, because I think he's a really good player that's just underused here because we're not trying to win games like that. And when he gets to, he's a really good player performer. I'm sure when he gets to the biggest stage, he's going to have some of his moments. And I want to root for that. And then on our end, we just got too many players that are going to play that same role at this point. 4 draft picks last year, 3 draft picks this year. We already have 3 players that we inherited from the first year that weren't quite draft picks, or they were. KJ was, but KJ Tatum and KBJ, guys that need minutes as well. We have Daishen Nix, who was not a draft, who wasn't drafted and was killing it in the G League, and the Rockets have said that they think he is a lottery level talent. And so it's just too much to play, and it just kind of, I don't want Eric Gordon being here and just not playing. I don't think that's fair to him. I don't think that's fair to what he did for us. And I don't think that's feasible whatsoever. So I would rather just trade him.
Yeah, I think it seems like, and we heard this again from Ben Dubose and Michael Scotto on the Logger Line podcast that Ben Dubose hosts. They both mentioned on there that it seems like the Rockets have a very firm asking price for Eric Gordon of a late teens, early 20s first round pick, and they're not going to come off that price. They're comfortable keeping him. We've heard that a number of times now. We've heard that since the trade deadline. The Philadelphia pick that was rumored, fell into that range, but it seemed like they didn't want another pick this year, which is understandable. Maybe if a team offers up a 2023 round first pick for Eric Gordon, that's something that they can entertain. Now that the draft has occurred, that opened up a new set of picks that teams are able to offer in trades. So that may change the calculus on an Eric Gordon trade. I do want to point that out because of the Stepien rule. But at the end of the day, I think we don't have a ton of vets on this team. I think that's something that the front office is taking into account. We do have Boban, so now Rockets legend and very marketable player, Boban Marjanovic, will be there in some capacity, we believe. But unless they bring in a backup center who's someone that's really a vet and can kind of fill that role, it seems like they do value having Eric Gordon around for the vet leadership. Maybe if they trade Eric Gordon, they could bring someone back. For example, Danny Green got traded, right? That was part of that deal that Philadelphia did.
Sorry?
Did Danny Green get traded from the Sixers?
Yes. He was the salary filler on the D'Anthony Melton trade.
Okay. So, that would have been someone that would have been good to bring in and replace Eric Gordon. I know many people have brought up Ricky Rubio as a potential replacement for Eric Gordon as a leadership guy. I think if they do trade Eric Gordon, I could see them wanting to get someone like that coming back in the trade. So that's what I'm expecting if they do end up trading Eric Gordon in the near future, is they'll trade him for someone where they can get that little bit of vet leadership back in the deal. And again, it doesn't matter if that player is injured for the year or whatever the case may be, because that's of no concern for the Rockets at this time. So I think that's a good place to leave it. Do you have any closing thoughts on the draft? Do you have any closing thoughts on you want to address your haters? This is a big time for you and your haters. You want to address haters? I may address the haters before I leave. So we'll see.
No. I'm just going to say that my read on the Eric Gordon situation, there's still rumors from Sixers beat writers that are still interested in Eric Gordon, but they already traded most of the salary filler that they had there to Memphis for D'Anthony Melton. But the way I look at it is actually, I think what Maury was trying to do there was, if they made the pick, right, then the Rockets would no longer be interested in that player. It's the drive the car out of the lot situation. But what they did is they traded the pick for someone who was easily worth that pick. D'Anthony Melton is someone who can fetch a late pick for most teams. And so what they plan to do is, if they indeed want Eric Gordon, what they can now do is make that a 3 or a 4 team trade and send and find a third team that wants Anthony Melton, that is willing to give up a late first or a protected first for him, and they get Anthony Melton, and that serves still as the outgoing salary for the Sixers plus Korkmaz, which is what they need for Eric Gordon, and then the Rockets get whichever filler from this third team comes to us along with the pick, and the Eric Gordon goes to the Sixers. So it's either that or it's Daryl Morey doing Stone a solid and leaking interest and saying that he's still interested in Eric Gordon to try and give him some leverage in trade talks. But that's mostly my read on that in specific. When it comes to the haters,
notable bro, Daryl Morey, looking out for his protege Rafael Stone. You love it.
Yeah, and about the hater stuff, I mean, guys, I told you all during the entire draft process that I was going to defend whoever we took. Do I wish it was Banchero? Yes, but eventually I won't, and that's something that's going to dissipate. And while I did think that he was the better prospect at the beginning, he's not our prospect. And so I'm not going to be tweeting about him. I'm going to be tweeting about Jabari and all the good things that Jabari has, right? And for the people that don't talk the other prospect down, guys, this is the draft. The draft is very much fundamentally about comparison. You compare the prospects that are available between each other and you decide which one to pick, right? You don't look at each person's strengths individually. No, you compare them to each other and you decide which one is the better option. Okay, it's not. It is very much about comparison. The entire NBA is very much about comparison. It has always been. It will always be. This doesn't mean I don't like Banchero. No, I do like Banchero, but I don't care about him anymore. right? He's not a Houston Rockets player. Jabari is. And so I'm going to keep tweeting about Jabari, and I'm going to keep pretending that I didn't like Banchero at the beginning, because I don't care about him anymore. I care about the guy that's here and how he fits and how exciting he is and how he's going to be a part of our future. Okay.
And so I mentioned this earlier on in the show, but I'm gonna kind of reiterate this here and kind of state my position on how I'm gonna operate going forward, and how I kind of handled it through the draft. But I had Jabari number 2 on my board. I was one of the people. This was a few months ago. I had a tweet. I went back and checked, and I said, I wanted to be very clear on what I had said in the tweet, but I said, my worry with Jabari is that he's closer to Trevor Ariza than he is to Chris Middleton. And, I put that on a spectrum. I didn't say that he was Trevor Ariza specifically, but, Trevor Ariza is still a starting forward on the championship winning team, right? And he almost won on another championship level team before he went full Ariza and missed all those threes. So, Jabari, I'm a lot more confident in his shot. I'm confident in the handle development. I think his handle is already better than Ariza's. That was definitely not part of Ariza's strong set. Ariza was a good passer, kind of underrated passer, but not really a playmaker, I would say. But other than that one tweet, I really never attacked Jabari that much outside of our feud with someone who will remain nameless on the show. But I had Jabari over Chet on my board for a substantial period of the year. I never really attacked Jabari generally, so I don't think me pivoting to Jabari, there's anyone should really feel any type of way about that. I think he does fit well with what we're trying to do. I do think the defense is something that's going to be very beneficial to the team. So yeah, I will be pumping out Jabari propaganda. I was disappointed during the draft. I think my disappointment really stemmed from being lied to, deceived, whatever you want to call it, by a lot of the intel that we heard, a lot of the intel that came from Woj. The Magic said they wanted Banchero the whole time. We had a lot of people confirming that. We had a lot of people, trying to substantiate that. And so for me, it was the expectation of this is our guy. I can already buy in, and that's really what we're gonna do. And not getting who you came in expecting to get, it was the shock of, wow, this didn't go the way I thought it did. But, once that initial shock wore off, we're getting a good player. Shooting and defense are very important in the NBA for sure. And I think, you really have to trust and have faith in Şengün, Jalen, and KPJ as playmakers that kind of overcome the playmaking that you're not going to get with Banchero. But other than that, I think this is a great pick. I think the draft overall is a great pick. It shows that Rafael Stone, has a commitment to wing defense, team building, and guys that are going to come in and play hard. And it's kind of a thing on Twitter right now for those of you who aren't on Twitter, but guys that have that dog in them, right? Hopefully we'll get some Jabari and Tari edits with that dog over their heart. I'm definitely looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to pushing propaganda for these guys for the next 4 to 10 years. So I think that's a good place to leave it. Shout out to everyone that has given us shit for liking Paolo. I do not care. Keep doing it. You're not going to stop me. I have no shame. So on that note, follow me at Don Knock. Follow Paolo at Paulo Alves NBA. You can follow the pod at Clutch City CR in the description or the bio there. You can find the link tree for the YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcast links. That's going to do it for us. Until next time, y'all, be safe and go Rockets.